Chapter 8, Photosynthesis, Section 8.1. In this section, we are going to focus on what is energy and life, and why do we need energy to sustain life here on planet Earth. So ultimately, what we see is that living things need energy to survive. And here's where we see that concept of autotroph and heterotroph. So this energy comes from food. Our energy comes from the food, and the energy in most food comes from the sun. So the ultimate source of energy to our planet would be that of the sun's energy or solar energy. This would be for all things that would be available to sunlight. So there are some conditions which I'd like you to think about in which sunlight is not available for organisms to obtain energy from. And we'll talk about that in class. So where do plants get the energy they need to produce food? That is going to be the focus of this chapter and part of this section. So in order to answer that question fully, we need to identify what is an autotroph and what are heterotrophs. So let's revisit this concept that we learned in chapter 1. So the key concept here is plants and some other types of organisms are able to use light energy from the sun to produce food. So we just finished a chapter on energy, chemical energy, and ATP. So energy comes in many forms, including light, heat, and electricity. We've also discussed potential energy and chemical energy. We said that energy can be stored in chemical compounds. So chemical energy being stored energy, recall, is potential energy. An important chemical compound that cells use to store and release energy is a molecule called adenosine triphosphate, abbreviated ATP. ATP is used by all types of cells as their basic energy source. It's the energy currency of our cells, and if you recall that the energy, this energy is made in the cell structure called the mitochondria. And we'll look at this whole entire process in chapter 9. We'll discuss it. So if we look at ATP, here is its structure. ATP consists of adenine, which is a nitrogenous base. It consists of ribose, which is a 5-carbon sugar, which is a pentose sugar. And it consists of 3 phosphate groups, hence adenosine triphosphate. It is here in this molecule, in these 3 phosphate groups, where you have stored energy right here in this bond. So it's that terminal bond. So storing energy. You have a molecule that is closely related to that of ATP called ADP. ADP has 2 phosphate groups instead of 3. A cell can store small amounts of energy by adding a phosphate group to ADP. When that happens, we say that ADP has become phosphorylated. So adenosine diphosphate plus a phosphate group is somewhat like a partially charged battery. When you add that phosphate group and some energy to that molecule, then you form ATP. ATP is like a fully charged battery. So, in releasing energy, the energy stored in ATP is released by breaking the chemical bond between the second and the third phosphate group. We call that the terminal bond. When that bond is broken, you release about negative 7.3 kilocalories per mole of energy. Boom. There it happens. So released energy, we release that phosphate group, and now we have a molecule of ADP plus P. So what is the role of ATP in cellular activities? The energy from ATP is needed for many cellular activities, including active transport, which we discussed when we did cell membrane structure function, protein synthesis, we will discuss that later, and including muscle contraction. So every time you would contract or relax your muscles, that requires a source of ATP. So ATP's characteristics make it exceptionally useful as the basic energy source of all cells. That's a key concept. So putting this all together and using biochemical energy, most cells have only a small amount of ATP because it is not a good way to store large amounts of energy. Cells can regenerate ATP from ADP as needed by using the energy in foods like glucose. Can you think of any other molecules in addition to glucose that may also serve as energy sources in food to make ATP? Let's quiz yourself after this lecture. What are organisms called that make their own food? If you selected autotrophs, you would be correct. Most autotrophs obtain their energy from A. Chemicals in the environment, B. Sunlight, C. Carbon dioxide in the air, or D. Other producers. B. Sunlight is the correct answer. How is energy released from ATP? A phosphate group is added. B, an adenine is added. C, a phosphate is removed. D, a ribose is removed. If you pick C, a phosphate is removed, you would be correct. How is it possible for most cells to function with only a small amount of ATP? A, cells do not require ATP for energy. B, ATP can be quickly regenerated from ADP plus P. C, cells use very small amounts of energy. D, ATP stores large amounts of energy. B, ATP can be quickly regenerated from ADP and P. Compared to the energy stored in molecules of glucose, ATP stores A, much more energy, B, much less energy, C, about the same amount of energy, D, energy sometimes and less at other times, more energy sometimes and less energy at other times. That's all for section 8.1. Thank you and have a nice day.